on air? Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Oh, this is rad. I have like the exact time on my screen up here, so we are about to start in 15 seconds. Sweet. All right, everyone, to start off with, if you want to take these, pass those around. If you need a pen, too, raise your hand. There will be a $20 reward at the end of the week for the person with the most notes. So, all right, so whoever takes the most notes, $20. And David brought his old notes to copy. You think I'm going to teach the same messages, bro?
You've been doing it for the past 3 years.
Maybe. All right. Okay, sweet. I am so excited. We are starting. This is happening right now. Quest is official. It's been 34 seconds into Truth Quest now. All right, so we are ready to start. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to get in your word. I pray that you would just speak to each one of our hearts tonight. Lord, I pray that you would remove any distractions. Lord, and I just pray that we would be willing to hear from you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so our first session tonight is, does God exist? Does God exist? Yes, thank you, Abel. Brian, can you get him a pen? All right, so does God exist is our first message. And our theme this year, as you guys will be getting the shirts, truth and meaning. So our theme verse is John 17:17. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So sanctify means to be set apart. It means to be used for a certain purpose, okay? Now, a paintbrush is used for what? Painting. Good job, Abel. So it's used for painting, right? Now, you could probably still use that paintbrush, put like barbecue sauce on your hamburger, but that's not what it's intended for, right? You could try to use it for other things. In the same way, you were created for a specific purpose, and you could try to use your life for other things, but God has designed you to have a specific meaning for your life. So he says, your word is truth. If there is no truth, then there is no meaning to life. If there is no God, there is no purpose to life. If you just were by chance and made through evolution, then you have no meaning in your life at all. And it doesn't really matter if you live or die, really, if we just came here by chance. But if there's a God, then we know that we have meaning. You know, people used to ask really deep questions. They used to ask questions like, where did this all come from? Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? Have you guys ever heard the term wanderlust? You ever seen that? Like if you go on Pinterest, everyone's like all stoked on wanderlust, hashtag wanderlust. It's like all about going out camping and just finding yourself by being lost. What's really concerning is that we're more focused on being lost than ever finding anything. And secondly, what's concerning is we don't care about the big questions anymore. We've lost our wonder. So everything begins with this simple question, does God exist? Now, we stopped asking these big questions. It's amazing. How many of you guys have cell phones? Anybody? All right, sweet. Now, through your cell phone, you could see anything you want in the world, right? But this is what it's done. It's giving you this perspective of the world. You no longer have this big perspective of life. So, this is a video done by a local photographer, okay? So, and I want you to take your hand, okay? And I want you to put them together like that and see if you can look through it, okay? Now look up at the screen, all right? Okay? Now, what perspective are you getting of that? Are you seeing the whole picture, or is it restricted? Okay, try closing one eye or covering one eye and looking at it. Now open both eyes. All right? This is called myopic. Do you guys know what myopic is, right? It's nearsighted. It's short-sighted. It means that you only have a limited view of the world. Now, this is all Borrego, right? Now, you could watch this video over and over and over on your phone or whatever device you might have. But actually what you could do that was a lot greater is why don't you just go outside and look at the stars? This is where you live. You know, we've lost our sense of wonder. So our journey begins with 3 parts. Number 1, reason for belief. Number 2, reasons for truth. And thirdly, reasons for morality, or reasons for right and wrong. So at the 4 o'clock session, we're doing reasons for belief. Okay, this is all of like the college class style messages that are getting into the evidence and really focusing on why we know God to be real, why the Bible is true, why we know he rose from the dead, why God allows bad things to happen. The second section is the reasons for truth. That's going to be at 6:30, and that's where we'll be looking at the topic of truth and meaning. And then at the high school section, we're going to be looking at some pretty deep issues at 8:30 tonight, and that's going to be looking at things like abortion, homosexuality, sexuality, marijuana, drugs, alcohol, things like that, and why they are right and wrong. Is it just based upon my own opinion and my own thought, or is there an actual objectivity to why things are right or wrong? But all of that doesn't matter if God doesn't exist. Like the other 10 messages you're going to hear don't matter unless you can agree with this first message that God exists. So this is why it's really important that we really dig into this question. Now, I have a super modest goal. I'm not here to prove that Christianity is absolutely undeniable, okay? Rather, it's to show that it's the most probable answer given all competing answers. So, what does it mean for something to be possible? What does it mean for something to be possible? Able to be done, right? Okay. Someone else give an example of that. What does it mean to be able to be done? Possible. Is it possible that there are unicorns? No. Yes. Yes, it's possible. Okay? It's possible. You know what's not possible is a square circle. That's impossible. Okay? All right? There are a lot of possibilities, but it doesn't mean that it's true, right? Okay? Plausible. What is reasonable? Okay? For example, I'm going to have liver for dinner tonight is a plausible statement, or is a possible statement, but is not a plausible one, because why? I really don't like liver, and I don't know if I like liver because I'm just not going to try it. So just because it can be done doesn't mean it will be done. Okay? Is it reasonable? Thirdly, is it probable, meaning it's most likely, right? Like in my house, when he would give me an answer, he would say maybe, and when my dad said maybe, that meant most likely yes, okay, right? Now with my mom, her saying maybe, that meant most likely no, okay? We all have that parent, right? So considering all the options, the most likely answer is this, okay? For example, this is what we do in forensic study. Now, when a cop shows up to a scene, right, and he sees the evidence, does he know 100% what exactly happened? No, why? Because he wasn't there. But he can be able to show this is the most probable answer giving all the evidence, right? Now, looking at this, is this probable that someone built this? Why would you say that? Because it's in a place. Because it's created. What else? Yeah, it's stacked neatly, right? Now, if you walked into the room, right, and you saw Legos on the floor, right, would you think someone's like, I'm going to put that Lego facing that way, and that Lego facing that way, and that Lego facing, would that say like someone designed that right there? No, you think someone dropped the Legos and hasn't cleaned up. But you see something like that, you see design, right? You see the most probable answer is, now, is it possible that this could have over millions and millions of years, the plastic evolved and created a sequence? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Is it probable? No. Okay? Considering most likely, the most likely answer is that someone created it. But it is possible it could have evolved. It's just not very probable. Okay? So I'm going to show you that it's possible that God doesn't exist, but it's most probable that he does, right? Okay? Christianity does not profess to convince the perverse and the headstrong, to bring irresistible evidence to the daring and profane, to vanquish the proud scorner, and afford evidence from which the careless and perverse cannot possibly escape. This might go to destroy man's responsibility. All that Christianity professes is to propose such evidence as may satisfy the meek, the tractable, the candid, and the serious inquirer. Timothy Keller said this: Christians do not claim that their faith gives them omniscience or absolute knowledge of reality. Only God has that. But they believe that the Christian account of things, creation, fall, and redemption, and restoration, makes the most sense in the world. Okay? So the evidence that I'm going to give you, if you don't want to believe it, it's not going to be enough. Okay? But if you're like a serious inquirer, you're like, yeah, I'm open, then this evidence is very, very compelling that we're going to be looking at tonight. So let's start getting into evidence for the existence of God. Hasn't science disproved the existence of God? People will say that. Or, I cannot believe in a God that can't be tested by science. Has anyone heard that? Like teachers or friends or anything like that? Now, this is true depending on what we consider science to be. Okay? So, what is this? No, this is a ball. But it's a ball. No, I'm just kidding. It's a ball that looks like Earth, okay? Now, we're going to use this ball to represent the entire world, okay? Now, I'm sorry. I'm going to reverse this because I can't do it. We're going to use this ball instead. All right. This ball is going to represent God, okay? This ball is, this is not a ball. This is a box. I'm starting off Truth Quest bad. All right, so this is a box that's going to represent the universe, okay? Everything that is inside it, the earth and everything, okay, that's the universe, right? Now, naturalism believes that there is nothing outside of the universe, right? It's only the natural, okay? And the only thing that can create is what's inside the box. Humans can create other humans. Humans can create cars and machines, and the processes and all of the things like quantum physics and stuff like that, that's what they say explains creation, right? So they're saying the box created itself, okay? We as Christians believe there's a God that is external, transcendent, outside the box, right? That created the box, okay? Now science, the problem with the definition of science is this, that, well, let me ask you this. What is the scientific method? Anybody know? Anybody know what the hypothesis and test your data. Okay, right? It's observation, right? What you can test, what is testable. Is God necessarily testable? No, the effects are, but not God himself, right? And so naturalism says there's no possibility that there's anything outside the box. That is, science is assumed to be not only rational and causal and unified, but also naturalistic, banning by definition even the possibility of a supernatural first cause of rationality, causality, and the unity of the universe with which science deals. But such an assumption is purely arbitrary, even emotional, as Isaac Asimov had admitted, and was certainly not held by the great scientists of the past, nor is indicated by any actual scientific data. So, what most scientists are starting to discover is that there is something external to the universe. Now, we're going to show that this view of science is not only unscientific, but false. Consider this. Most of the first scientists were theologians. They were Christians, right? You had ones like Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, Lord Kelvin, Louis Pasteur, Matthew Murray, Michael Faraday, Clerk Maxwell, John Ray, and just to name a few of them. And all these are fathers of all the different disciplines of science. Like, they started it, and they were all believers, and it was their faith that drove them to science. Edward Larson and Larry Wilson in 1996 did a survey and showed that 40% of the working scientists at that time they surveyed believe that there is a God that answers prayer. So to say that all scientists don't believe in God is just categorically false, right? Now we could say that most scientists don't believe in a God, or they're like agnostic or have some kind of deism or something like that. But to say that all scientists are agreed that there is no God is false, okay? It's closed-minded and unscientific to believe only in the material. Now, I am going to say this. We all have bias. You guys know what bias is, right? Bias is like when your parents are going to pick you first because you're the favorite child, right? That's bias, right? Okay, we all are going to be biased in our approach to finding evidence for God, right? Because we're going to want it to be true or not to be true, okay? But I would say that those who believe in naturalism have a greater bias than those who are theists. Why is that? Well, I like what Greg Kokel said. He said, the current bias of science arbitrarily eliminates certain answers before the games get started. Many scientists and historians must come up with conclusions that leave what? The supernatural out of the picture, because their philosophy demands it. A theist is not so encumbered. She believes in the laws of nature, but is also open to the possibility of supernatural invention. Both are consistent with her worldview. She can judge the evidence on its own merits, unhindered by philosophy that automatically eliminates supernatural options before the evidence receives a hearing. Ironically, Christian's bias broadens her categories, making her more open-minded, not less. She has a greater chance of discovering the truth because she can follow the evidence where it leads. You get that? So if the evidence leads to that there's a God, they can believe it. Because why? They believe that that's a possibility, right? But for the naturalist, if the evidence starts leading to a God, they'll say, you got to remind yourself, we're going to be looking at quotes, it looks like it's designed. I mean, it really does. But you got to remind yourself, it's not possible that it's designed. Even though it looks like it's designed and you're really simple-minded, you just got to remind yourself that's not possible. Why? Because of their bias, okay? I like what Charlie Campbell said. For me, it's more reasonable to believe, based on the laws of logic, as well as the observable scientific evidence that God exists, rather than to believe what the atheist believes, that nothing times nobody equals everything we see in the universe. So what evidence do we have that God exists? Write this verse down. Romans chapter 1, verse 20 says this. For since the creation of the world, that's the word cosmos in the Greek, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they, people who reject God, are without excuse. He says, you look at the stars, you look at the universe, you look how your body is made, you look at how things are so intricately put together. You do not need the Bible to know there's a God. Okay? You might not know who he is, but you can know that he does exist. Okay? That's called general revelation, right? Pastor Steve on Tuesday is going to be talking about why the Bible's true. Okay? And looking at actual evidence for that. That's called special revelation. Okay? General revelation is the idea that I generally know there's a God. Special revelation is he's told me through his word who he is. Okay? So, we have evidence in creation. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at three major disciplines of scientific study that give us clues and reasons for God. The first one we're going to look at is cosmology, the supernatural first cause. Okay? Supernatural first cause. The second one we're going to look at is physics, or the fine-tuning of the cosmos. And thirdly, we're going to look at biological information, or DNA, okay? So those are the three we're going to look at. Now, are those the only three evidence for the existence of God? No, okay? I would encourage you to read the book, The Biblical Basis for Modern Science by Henry Morris. It's in your packet. It has the title of that book. If you want to borrow my copy, I have 2 copies. I would love for you guys to be able to read it. If you're homeschooled, it's a really good science book, actually, too. Other resources are also in your truth map. other evidences for God is there's one called the ontological argument. There's the moral argument that we'll be looking at a little bit later. There's evidence of astrobiology. You know how they've been discovering other Earths? But it is so impossible for human life to be on any other Earth that it's like, it's possible, but it's not probable at all. And so the question is why does life exist on Earth? Well, it shows that there's design here because the factors to have life on Earth are just too grand. So that's an awesome thing. There's a great DVD that you can check out in our library, or you can find it on YouTube, called The Privileged Planet. It's an hour documentary that will give you the evidence for astrobiology, okay? And then also the evidence of the human mind. You have thought. You think your thoughts just evolved? You think your emotion just evolved? Where there is knowledge, there is a knowledge giver, isn't there? So the human mind is evidence, all right? We're going to watch a video. I'm concerned that maybe my channel for my computer might be muted. We'll see. So the last one didn't have audio. Let's see. We'll find out. Yep, it's muted. Christina, can you see if that last channel is muted? Okay. You're good? Okay, let's try it now.
Lots of people say there's no evidence for God. Well, we're going to knock that one out in 3. I'm just going to have to keep it simple, throw in the old 1-2 combo, get in and out real quick, and let you fine folks chat all about it, okay? Punch 1 I'm going to call the info uppercut. When's the last time you walked into a library and asked, hey, where are all the books that have been written by mindless products of natural laws? The librarian would probably laugh at you and tell you that no such books exist. They don't exist because they can't exist. Why not? Because first of all, it's just common sense. The words that form the message in books always originate from a person with a brain. Or to say it a bit more scientifically, the message of the book, the purpose, comes to be understood by the orderly placement of the words, design, and information. Ah, information. Now, anytime we find info, these basic laws always apply. Number 1, matter doesn't spontaneously produce information. Number 2, only a mental source, intelligence, can generate new creative information. In other words, just like those books that couldn't originate without a mind, neither could life. Why not, you ask? Because we know that DNA contains information. Therefore, the laws of information science apply, which means the information in DNA couldn't have spontaneously generated, and that a mind is behind the information. Period. No exceptions. Look at it this way. The simplest life form we know of is an amoeba, and it contains as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of encyclopedic. So, are we to believe that there's no way a message in a library book could spontaneously generate, but far more complicated messages in DNA that contain 1,000 times more information could have? Not likely. You see, when it comes to life or anything else that contains information, the laws of information science confirm the necessity of a creative mind. And guess what? In the very first book of the Bible, it just happens to mention that. In the beginning, God created. Bam! Uppercut lands on the chin. And now here comes the indefensible head blow. We'll call this the not a big bang bing swing, the KO to the claim that there's no evidence of God, the law of causality, left hook of doom. It goes like this. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. Now, either something caused the universe to come into existence, or nothing caused it. Huh. I might not be the smartest guy behind the telescope, but honest, practical, everyday thinking's going to lead me to the latter. You have to work pretty hard to conjure up a way that nothing did it. You see, it's pretty improbable, nigh impossible, to account for design, information, and cause if the universe just exploded from nothing. Smack! And while we're on the topic, where did the matter come from that exploded? Are we really to believe that there was nothing and then it exploded, and now the exploded nothing is something, and we just happen to be smart enough to discover and understand the very laws that prove the opposite? And if the general understanding of the law of cause and effect is true, how can matter come from a lesser cause like nothing? I mean, come on. I don't have a bunch of letters after my name, but even a monkey knows better. And yeah, I snuck in a couple of extra jabs in there, so sue me. Now for some parting words from our sponsor, the Bible. It tells us in Romans 1:20 that since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. It also says that people actually know the truth, but they reject it, which explains why even though there's overwhelming evidence that there is a God, evidence won't convince the unwilling. Sad but true. So there you have it. With just a couple of meaningful blows, the claim that there is no evidence for God is down for the count, amigos. In other words, it's been debunked.
All right, so what evidence do we have that God exists? All right, so our first one is going to be cosmology or cosmogony. All right, now cosmogony is the study of ideas about the origin of the cosmos or the universe. The term is closely related to cosmology, but cosmology is more just the study of the universe, while cosmogony is the study of the origin of the universe, okay? So what is the cosmos? Can someone give me the answer? What is the cosmos? David's going to start searching his last year papers. What is the cosmos? Anybody tell me? Okay. Stars. Okay, stars. All right. The cosmos, in simple terms, right, is space, mass, time, right? Universe, and all its arrays of complex systems. Remember Genesis 1:1. God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter, in the beginning, time. Okay? So the whole universe is those three factors: space, matter, and time. Okay? And the Bible tells us that God created it. So here is the cosmology argument. This is the cosmological argument for the existence of God, and it is one of my favorite evidences ever. So check this one out, okay?
Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be? One approach to answering this question is the cosmological argument. It goes like this: whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. Is the first premise true? Let's consider. Believing that something can pop into existence without a cause is more of a stretch than believing in magic. At least with magic, you've got a hat and a magician. And if something can come into being from nothing, then why don't we see this happening all the time? No, everyday experience and scientific evidence confirm our first premise. If something begins to exist, it must have a cause. But what about our second premise? Did the universe begin, or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever. The universe is just there, and that's all. First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's the point. If the universe had been here forever, it would have run out of usable energy by now. The second law points us to a universe that has a definite beginning. This is further confirmed by a series of remarkable scientific discoveries. In 1915, Albert Einstein presented his general theory of relativity. This allowed us, for the first time, to talk meaningfully about the past history of the universe. Next, Alexander Friedmann and George Lemaitre, each working with Einstein's equations, predicted that the universe is expanding. Then in 1929, Edwin Hubble measured the red shift in light from distant galaxies. This empirical evidence confirmed not only that the universe is expanding, but that it sprang into being from a single point in the finite past. It was a monumental discovery, almost beyond comprehension. However, not everyone is fond of a finite universe, so it wasn't long before alternative models popped into existence. But one by one, these models failed to stand the test of time. More recently, three leading cosmologists, Arvin Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, proved beyond the space-time universe. It must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful. Much like God. The cosmological argument shows that, in fact, it is quite reasonable to believe that God does exist.
All right, so let's look more at the cosmological argument. Right, so number one, the universe is evidence that God exists. Okay, so number one, something exists. Anyone want to deny the first point of our syllogism? Anybody want to say that nothing exists? Well, you have to exist to be able to say something. that nothing exists, right? So we can all agree that something exists, all right? Secondly, nothing does not produce something. So nothing does not produce something. So number one, something exists. Number two, nothing does not produce something. Then we have a rather astounding conclusion that logically follows. Something must have always existed. All right, so the eternal is a fact. Okay, so something must have always existed. Anything that began must have had a cause. So we are left with the only option that there's something that has always existed. So what is it that's always existed? We have two options. What are the things that have always existed? Anybody know? What are the two options we have? I'm going to start giving out prizes too. What are the two options? If you get it wrong, you still get a prize. What are the two options of eternal things? God, okay. Anybody else want to stress ball? Huh? Time? Okay. All right. The two options are this. Number one, the universe, or something outside the universe, okay? So, either the universe or something outside. Now, point number 4, the universe has not always existed. Now, we know this from the fields of astronomy and others, that the universe began in a finite point in time. We know that the universe had a beginning. This is something that we all believe. Everything came into existence. Now, the second law of thermodynamics is one of the most established laws in all of science. Can somebody tell me what the law of thermodynamics is? Anybody? What is the second law of thermodynamics? Anybody know? Yeah, that's exactly it. Everything is running out of usable energy. So the second law of dynamics is kind of like a flashlight, right? If you see a flashlight on, right, and the battery's starting to die out, right, you know that it started with a finite amount of energy and it's dying out. You see that in the universe, right? Things are slowly winding down. Just like, let's see if this wind-up toy is probably going to be the one that doesn't work. Okay, come on. Wow. Oh, it does work. So just like this wind-up toy, oh, he fell. Eventually, it's going to run out of energy, right? So we know, can something always exist if it's running out of energy? No, right? Because it started with a usable amount from the beginning, okay? There's also the evidence of like the red shift hue, like he talked about in the video, but I'm not going to get into that. So, fifthly, there must be an eternal power beyond the universe that caused the universe to come into existence. The most basic scientific principle and the criterion that governs all human experience is the law of causality. The law states that although one cause can have many effects, no effect can be either quantitatively greater or qualitatively greater superior to its cause. An effect can never be greater, in fact, will always be less than its cause. Thus, a chain of effects and their causes must eventually trace to an essential infinite first cause. So we know that nothing happens in isolation. When we try to trace an event to its cause or causes, we find that we never have a never-ending stopping point, okay? Like, for example, okay, have you ever heard anyone say, who created God, right? You've ever asked that question, who created God? And then someone's like, well, so-and-so created God, if they came up with an answer. And you're like, well, then who created him? And then they'd be like, I don't know. And they'd be like, okay, then who created him? And who created that person? And who created that person? And what do you have? An infinite amount of causes, right? So you'd have to just trace it all the way back. Infinite amount of cause. So the event itself would have to have a prior cause. We have to finally get to an eventual first cause. The universe demands a first cause. Do you guys understand this? You guys catching on to what I'm saying? Nod your head no if you don't understand yet. Okay, I'll keep going. All right, so if you're saying that you have multiple causes, right? keep going back for all eternity, you eventually have to have a beginning, right? You have to have an uncaused cause, okay? The uncaused cause. Here's kind of an example of what Henry Morris was talking about, okay? To give you an idea of a cause. All right, I drop this ball, right? What's going to happen? It's going to bounce, right? Now, one thing you'll notice is the ball bounced back higher than the way it was dropped. Did it come back higher? That's a super simple. Turn your brains on. Yes or no? Okay. All right. No, it did not. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, right now I could put more force into it and it would come back, right? But that's because I'm putting force into it, right? So, an effect, the ball bouncing back, okay, cannot be greater than its cause. Me putting the force into it of it going down. It can't be greater in quantitatively or qualitatively. Does that make sense? So, what do we have as the effect? What is the effect that we know? Okay, because we see it all around us. What's the effect? We're talking about God and the evidence for God. The earth, right? Everything that we see. What do we see in the world? What are some of the things we see? Mountains, okay, right? It's oceans, big things. You guys are going to just name animals, aren't you? And you're going to ruin my point. Okay, we see intelligence. We see life. We see love, right? We see power. We see limitless space, okay? Now, if all those big, huge things are the effects that we know to be real, and we know something had to create it, what did that creative being have to be like? Bigger. There you go, Brian. Thank you so much. All right, so it had to be bigger than all those effects, right? Whoops. Can you push play on the keyboard back there? I accidentally pushed exit out of this one. Pushed the wrong button. So, it's on the top middle row. Let's see, maybe I can do it for my key. Yeah, just push play. Yeah, thank you. You want to push play on that for me, Brian? On the computer over here. Yeah, I exited out of my PowerPoint. Thank you. All right. So, our cause. The first cause must fulfill the following criteria. The first cause of limitless space must be infinite, right? It has to be greater. Number 2, the first cause of endless time must be eternal. The first cause of boundless energy must be eternal. The first cause of infinite complexity must know everything, okay? The first cause of love must be all-loving. The first cause of life must be living, okay? So this is how you talk to somebody about it. So Wesley, when you go to school next week and you want to talk to somebody about God, this is what you'll say to them, okay? Say, can we agree that something exists, right? And your friend will be like, yes, with the sweet mustache, okay? And he'll say, can we agree that nothing does not produce something? And they'll be like, okay, I feel like I'm walking into a trap. Let me think about that for a second. And then you would say, this should be easy to realize. Nothing can't do anything. What is nothing? It's no thing. It can't eat, breathe, think, move, or act. Nothing is nothing. Even David Hume conceded that it is an absurd proposition to suggest that things arise without a cause. Do you know what nothing is in the Latin? Anybody know? No thing. I want you guys right now to think about nothing. Just go ahead. Just think about nothing. It's impossible to do, right? Nothing cannot be produced, all right? Or produce something. And your friend will be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you say, if something exists and nothing does not produce something, then can we agree that something must have always existed? And they'll be like, uh-oh. See where you're going with this. And they'll say, what? And you say, something must have always existed to have brought into being the things that we now know now exist. For as you just agreed, nothing cannot produce something. Now, there are only two options as to what that something that has always existed might be: the universe or something outside the universe. Well, amazingly, today science have actually proven that the universe has not always existed, and you can give them the evidences that we just talked about. You guys following that mindset? All right, when I was like my second year in ministry, I had this box. It was like this question box, right? And kids would put questions in there, and I opened it up, and it's like, who made God? And I was like, no one made God. And I was like thinking for a minute, and I was like, you know what? That is not like mentally satisfying enough for me, for someone just to be like, say, no one made God. So I went and talked to Pastor Steve, and he gave me some Bible verses, and it wasn't enough for me. And I really was struggling with my faith for about a whole week. Now, that's a big deal when, like, your income's based on it, and your whole world has been based on it, and you grew up as a Christian. I was thinking, like, yeah, that's a good question. Like, who made God, right? And so I'm really struggling with that. This argument was actually what satisfied that question, who made God? Because you actually need an uncaused cause. You absolutely have to have an uncaused cause. It's not necessary based upon the effects, okay? So, next, let's look at physics. Can someone tell me what physics is? What is physics? Savannah. The fine-tuning of the cosmos, right? The laws of nature, right? That's what physics is. And it's like the easiest subject ever, and we should all become physicists, right? No, not true. All right. Theoretically.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or, another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence to suggest that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
So let me ask you, how does physics show that God exists? How does physics show that God exists? Chad, how does the physics show that God exists? Yeah, right? Now, if you have, like, for example, I'm doing this for Chad, a motorcycle, right? And you have all of its components completely, motorcycles have chains, right? Okay, yeah, you have the chain that's the perfect length, and it has, this is about all I know about a motorcycle, it has 2 wheels, and the engine runs, and all of that stuff, right? And that's as far as my knowledge goes. You're not going to be like, I wonder if this bike that I found out in the desert over millions and millions of years put itself together and put gas inside it. No, that's just ridiculous. But the universe is even more fine-tuned than any machine that any human has ever created, right? How did it get so fine-tuned? Well, some people say, well, there's just a generator out there that's made multiple universes and multiple millions, billions have failed, and this is the one that has finally worked. But then the question is where did the machine come from that's creating all these, multiple universes? And then that machine would have to be very fine-tuned, right? So you don't get order from chaos, do you? Right? You only get order from an actual mind. The next one is looking at DNA, the complexity of life. Creation is getting so loud that we have to cover our ears and close our eyes to not see what's playing before us. Richard Dawkins, who is the bulldog of Darwinism, he is not a believer in any way, wrote this book called The Blind Watchmaker, and he said, biology is the study of complex that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. It looks like it's designed, but you got to be really careful it's not. Francis Crick said, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Could you imagine a CSI coming on the scene and said, it looks like arson. I mean, it just totally looks like arson. I mean, everything shows that someone lit this place on fire, but we can't accept that because arsonists do not exist. There is no such thing as arsonists. That'd be ridiculous, right? But that's what the naturalists, or those who believe only in nature, believe. Would anyone drive by Mount Rushmore and be like, huh, that's funny. That looks just like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. That is so weird. You know, I wonder what the wind did here. Like, if the rain, just perfectly carved that. I mean, how many millions of years did it take for that Mount Rushmore just to carve itself? Right? But yet that's what you do about your body. People do about your body and everything else through the theory of evolution. Or even, you could walk through Borrego and you're walking by and you see an arrowhead, like a perfect arrowhead. And you pick that up and what are you going to assume? Right? Most likely, 100 plus years ago, an Indian made that arrowhead. Now, you can find rocks that are shaped in triangle form, but that's, possible. But something we see design all the time, and we see it especially in the eyeball. The eyeball has a lens on one side, okay? It has a light-sensitive retina that's made of rods and cones inside the other. The lens itself has a sturdy protective covering called the cornea and sits over an iris designed to protect the eye from excessive light. The eye contains an amazing watery substance that is replaced every 4 hours. Tear glands continually flush the outside clean. Tears bring oxygen to the cornea, carrying chemicals that kills bacteria and proteins to coat the eyes, wash the eyes, and move debris towards a lower drain, a lacrimal duct. An eyelid sweeps secretions over the cornea to keep it moist. Eyelashes protect it from dust, and extraordinary fine-tuned muscles are attached to the eye that move the eye and shape the lens for the function of focus. I love studying the eye. It's so incredibly powerful. Actually, your brain flips the image. Your eye's actually seeing it upside down and then flips it. I mean, there's just so many amazing things. That just doesn't happen by chance. But let's listen to Richard Dawkins and what he said about that.
Animals have evolved extraordinary adaptations to fit their environment, but they're not perfect. Designers can go back to the drawing board. Evolution is condemned to modify what's already there. So nature is full of compromises and imperfections. Creationists also ask how something so apparently perfect as the eye just sprang into existence. Well, it didn't. The basic chemistry that makes up a light-sensitive cell is shared right across the animal kingdom, and natural selection has seized on this time and time again.
Science has uncovered species at every stage in the evolution of the eye.
It is a cumulative process,
and each step of the way is more useful than the one before.
The eye has evolved independently at least 40 different times around the animal kingdom, and it has evolved gradually, improvement on improvement. And yet...
no sensible person would have ever left the body the way it is.
Like what? What's a good example of that?
The most dramatic is the human eye. It's held up as this example of perfection in the body. It's not perfect at all. It's a perfect example of why the body is not designed. Cover one, if you would, please. And we take the pin and we move it right in the, and you have to keep looking right at the bridge of my nose, so keep your eye fixed. And now we're going to move it just out a little bit, about 15 degrees, and right about there.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
You can't see it?
No.
Now can you see it?
Yes.
Now can you see it?
Yes.
Now can you see it?
No.
There's a blind spot.
Yeah.
That's really lousy. Our bodies are so fabulous in some respects. Our heart keeps beating and never takes a 5-minute vacation for decade after decade after decade. That's astounding. But we have an appendix, we have wisdom teeth, birth is difficult, many people get nearsightedness, and the combination of some things being so perfect and other things being such botched jobs is what should make us all sit up and take notice that this is something that's been shaped by natural selection. It has a lot of vulnerabilities built in that can be explained only by how natural selection works.
So our botched, compromised bodies are themselves evidence of evolution. They're shot through with history. Evolution is a fact. It's documented by science to the same degree Napoleon is by history. Some things are just true. They're not a matter of choice or opinion. But you'd never guess that in the place where this matters more than anywhere, in our schools, where the teaching of evolution has become a hugely sensitive issue for science teachers.
All right, so let's watch this video in response. Now think about both of them. Keep both in your mind.
The human eye is a marvel of design, much like a video camera, but far more advanced and versatile. Like some cameras, the eye is autofocusing. To do this, man-made cameras have to move the whole lens, but our eye changes the shape of its lens. Like a camera, the eye bends incoming light and creates an image inside the eye. But unlike cameras, the eye also sharpens the image along the edges. Similar to some cameras, the eye automatically adjusts to brightness, so we can see day or night. In fact, in dark conditions, the eye increases its sensitivity to light up to 100,000 times. Eyes are much more sophisticated than cameras. They convert the light image into electrochemical signals, which are sent immediately to a brain that processes the images and makes necessary adjustments. Many other aspects of the eye surpass anything humans can design. Eyes are self-cleaning, self-lubricating, and self-repairing. Even more marvelous, eyes are built automatically in the womb. No camera can repair or build itself. Evidence of design appears in all types of animals. Each eye seems specially designed for its environment, whether an eagle in flight or a fish in the sea. For example, owls have a special surface in the back of their eye which reflects light back through the retina. It helps them to see better in the dark. Flies have another design, a compound eye, which helps them to detect the slightest motion. Such diverse yet exquisitely designed eyes show the handiwork of our Lord.
Ask you this. Getting back to our first video, why do you think that Richard Dawkins holds to the fact that the eye is a good evidence for evolution? Because there's flaws. Okay, he brought up the flaws. What else? Huh? They're better than cameras. That's why we as believers. But for the first one, the evolutionist, because he can't believe it. Remember, he only believes what's inside the box. His bias keeps him from even looking at the evidence that it's possible that it could be designed. All right? Saying that a car can't fly doesn't mean that it doesn't show that it has design in it, right? Showing that an eye has a blind spot doesn't show that it doesn't have a lot of design, does it? Right? We all have limitations in all of our design that God's given us. But it doesn't account for the fact of how incredible it is, right, for the eye. Yes? It's super sophisticated. I'm going to give you a chicken. All right. So we're going to skip past this. I would love for you guys to look up this, but we're running out of time. Charles Darwin had a ton to say about how scary the eye was for him, even though he was the father of Darwinism. Well, his name's Darwin, so obviously father of Darwinism. But I wanted to show you guys this last video before we close.
In 1953, when Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of the DNA molecule, they discovered that DNA was a carrier of genetic information in the form of a 4-character digital code. That is to say that DNA functions like a software program, only more complex than anyone has ever created or devised. For a biological system to run and operate, it needs genetic information to build the proteins and protein machines that cause the cells to maintain their function.
This information is stored in a precise arrangement of 4 chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G. Sequences of these chemicals provide the instructions necessary to assemble complex protein molecules that in turn help form structures as diverse as eyes, legs, wings, and hearts. This code has been called the language of life, and it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Geneticist Michael Denton has estimated that the amount of biological information necessary to build all of the proteins in all of the species of organisms that have ever existed on planet Earth could be held in a single teaspoon. And we'd still have room left over for all of the information contained in every book ever written. The more I learned about DNA, the more I understood the significance of what Stephen Meyer called the most fundamental question facing biology today. Where did the information in DNA come from? How did it arise in the first place?
Well, lots of people have wanted to explain the origin of information by reference to the laws of physics and chemistry, or by reference to the chemical properties of the constituent parts of the DNA. But that would be like saying that you could explain the information in this morning's New York Times headline by reference to the physics and chemistry of ink bonding to paper. There is a chemical explanation as to why the ink sticks to the paper, but that does not explain the way the ink got arranged to convey a message that could be understood by speakers of the English language. Information requires a material medium, but it transcends the material medium.
An explanation for the origin of the genetic instructions needed to build the first life is the holy grail of 21st century biology. Theories proposing that this information arose through natural selection acting upon non-living molecules, or the self-organizing power of chemicals in a primordial soup, have repeatedly failed. Even time and blind chance, the oft-invoked saviors of implausible biological scenarios, have fallen far short as accounts for the source of the instructions in DNA. Mathematicians, for example, have calculated that a universe filled with monkeys, typing relentlessly throughout the oldest estimated age of the cosmos, would have no realistic chance of producing Shakespeare's play Hamlet, let alone a transcript of the genetic information required to build even the simplest living cell.
Okay, DNA has information in it, right? If you took Scrabble letters and threw them on the grounds, you might get a couple words, but you're not going to get a whole sentence. DNA is incredibly sequenced information. So the question is where did all that information come from? Information doesn't write itself. Even if you had monkeys typing on keyboards all the time, you would never get the information that's in DNA, which shows that there is a creator. So I want to look at this last thing that we started with. And that's what Charlie Campbell said. He said this: "For me, it is more reasonable to believe, based on the laws of logic as well as the observable scientific evidence, that God exists, rather than to believe what the atheist believes, that nothing times nobody equals everything we see in the universe." All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time we can get in to this evidence, to read your word. Lord, I pray that we would truly know why you are real. And I pray that you would help us to remember these things to the best of our ability and to use them to help others. May you bless our time, bless the food to our body, bless those who prepared it.